Howdy goons, welcome to my 4th Game & Watch retrospective. We're almost done with the Silver Series, just Fire and Judge are left. If you're watching these videos, make sure to sub for more of them. You're going to want to be around when I get to the Game & Watches that inspired the DS. It's history time, once again. You might look at the Game & Watch and how Nintendo's talked about it and think it was destined to succeed from the very beginning. But in reality, there were a lot of opportunities for this to fail or just never exist in the first place. Had Gunpei Yokoi not rode the train that day and saw the businessman fiddling with his calculator, had that businessman decided to be more patient, then Mr. Yokoi would have never thought of the toy. But even the pitch to the president of Nintendo at the time, Hiroshi Yamauchi, was a chance meeting. President Yamauchi's chauffeur had called in sick that morning, so Mr. Yokoi offered to take him into work that day. Mr. Yokoi took this chance to pitch the Game & Watch to Mr. Yamauchi. It just so happened that Mr. Yokoi wasn't just driving Mr. Yamauchi to work, but was taking him to a business meeting with Sharp's CEO. There, Mr. Yamauchi and Sharp's CEO discussed the idea, and not even a whole week later, Mr. Yokoi got to pitch his calculator toy to Sharp, a calculator company. Sharp at this time was in a war with their competitor Casio, the watch people, and this led to both sides having a massive surplus of calculator parts. If any time was the right time for the Game & Watch, it was now. Sharp's CEO really liked the idea, but instead of taking the project for themselves, they handed it over to Nintendo's second research and development team, who was working on the Color TV game. It was basically an Atari-like home console that had built-in controllers. Research and Development 2 turned down the idea. They thought it wasn't possible to make the game calculator-sized, but Mr. Yokoi and his assistant knew it was possible. So they continued to work on the project and make a concept. The first mock-up of the game was done by cutting out shapes and shining a light from behind them like shadow puppets. Mr. Okada bought a computer, taught himself to program, and went to work designing the electronics. Once they showed Sharp the first concept, they turned down the project. They too thought it wouldn't be possible to scale down to the size of a calculator, but the two were so adamant about the concept working, so they left the prototype with Sharp and told them to just try it out. After this, Sharp was convinced that it was possible and set out to make the display immediately. There was so many opportunities for the Game & Watch to just never hit the market. It was so easy for the entire trajectory of Nintendo as a company to veer off course that day, but everything lined up just right, and with a little help from Gunpei Yokoi and Satoru Okada's perseverance, they made it work. If you think you can't make a game, keep in mind this story and how Satoru Okada taught himself programming in a day and age where YouTube tutorials weren't a thing. You have much more advantages now than these guys had. Even Mr. Yokoi wasn't always the ace game designer he, was known for. He started out his career as a janitor, and now his influence has left a mark on gaming decades after his death. Stop giving up before you even started. If they gave up, we wouldn't have the Game Boy, the Game & Watch, the DS, or the 3DS. Game & Watch Fire. Despite being a game about red-hot flames and saving people, this Game & Watch is themed with blue accents. Sure, there's blue fire, but when I think of hot, I think of reds and oranges. The system designed for Fire matches Ball, since this was also a simple 2-button game. So we had the usual buttons of left, right, game A, B, time, and reset. In the US, this game was localized as Fireman. Like Vermin being called the Exterminator, this broke Nintendo's single-word name scheme and localized it to a much longer name. Rather than the simple Fire, we have Fireman, and I guess there's two of them, so Fireman, because I guess no one at Timeout Games knew that the plural for man is men. I'm not even from this planet, and I know that. Anyway, the gameplay for this one is incredibly simple, but it's also one of my favorites. You play two firemen, and you move left and right trying to catch people who are jumping out of a burning building. They jump out of the burning building, tumble down, then you have to move to bounce them back up before they become a stain on the pavement. You keep bouncing them to the right until they land safely back into the ambulance. The challenge of this game comes from the same challenge as in Ball or Vermin. As the speed picks up, it gets harder to get to the falling people in time, but like Ball, the faster it goes, the closer together the two falling objects can get to each other. This makes it much harder to predict who will land first. Game A starts slower and takes a little bit to pick up speed, about a minute or so. As it goes on, the challenge increases by having you juggle more people at once. And Game B, the game starts faster, picks up speed, has you juggling multiple people, and all of that pretty early on. But the most annoying part of B is that there's a second lower balcony. When a guy jumps from there, he falls fast, like near instantly, and to make it worse, he can be indecisive about when he wants to jump. The ones on the top balcony tend to get out immediately, but the second balcony one will watch for upwards of several seconds. So you have to multitask with juggling your current people and being ready to zip over to the second balcony in an instant. Honestly, it's kinda super frustrating. I much prefer Game A. This is one of the more popular Game & Watch toys, having a remake in both Game & Watch Gallery 1 and 4, and a re-release with the widescreen Game & Watch series. You can, of course, play these with MAME emulation, GWG 1 on Game Boy, GWG 4 on Game Boy Advance, and through Retrofab if you just want to check out a full 3D version of it. I've linked Retrofab in the description because this might be the closest you get to playing the real thing. The 3D views of the box and game are from Retrofab. The best part is that these can be played in your browser with your keyboard, controllers, or by mouse click. Retrofab is great. It's like a museum of LCD games. In GWG 1 for the Game Boy Original, you have a reproduction of the original LCD game and a remake with Mario characters. Mario and Luigi replace the firemen, and Toads, Yoshi's, DK Jr., and Eggs fly out of the castle as you try to bounce them over to Peach's stagecoach. Each character that pops out has its own speed and fall style. Toads fly high and slow, DK Jr. bounces low, and Yoshi is in the middle. With the eggs, you have to bounce them to reveal the character inside, which is Bob-ombs. Don't bounce them over to the carriage. Instead, let them hit the ground. If you fail to bounce one of them, they hit the ground and Mario and Luigi run off and hide so no one accuses them of murder. Game A and B don't have any differences besides B starting harder. In GWG 4 for the Game Boy Advance, we have basically the same remakes, except for some key differences that affect the gameplay. In the original reproduction, we can see the silhouette of where the jumpers will be. This makes it easier to find out the trajectory of the jumpers, as well as makes it easier to figure out which jumpers are falling faster than the others. This greatly improves the feel of the game when compared to something like Ball. Since the Game Boy Advance was a 3:2 aspect ratio, it was a lot closer to the original Game & Watch series' screen ratio, which was 4:3. This means that the games didn't have to be squished as much and didn't have to have small borders. This makes the original an improved, yet authentic experience to the original, but it's still easier. In Game & Watch, if you're fast enough, you can time it so that you can hit 2 falling objects back to back, even if you're not in the correct fall order. This time frame is extended on GWG 4, even more so when you get to the remake version. In the modern remake version, characters don't fall in these set tiles. I mentioned this before. This makes it much easier to tell which character is falling first, since they have to animate more frames. But it's also more generous with the window time between being in a bounce spot and hitting the ground. Even though graphically this GBA version is very close to the GB remake, it's even more easy than GWG 1. So the characters having different behaviors are there to make it harder. And interestingly, technically 2 characters can be falling at the same time, as GBA sprites can overlap each other. These quirks of the modern software make Fire an incredibly easy game. Even the originals, which I've stated before, tend to be harder because they're not 60 FPS. But GWG 4, even the original version, is much easier than the prior iterations of Fire. So, which version is the best? I would say if you want an easier experience, GWG 4 on GBA. If you want a more authentic experience, I'd say the original, Retrofab, or GWG 1. Graphically though, I think GWG 1 is probably the best. Even though it's GB and it's lacking on color, the sprites are better looking than GWG 4. The sprites on GWG 4 kinda hit an uncanny valley for me. Like, they were trying to be more realistic but weren't quite there. It's not a huge problem with Fire on GWG 4, but GWG 4 in general has an uncanny art style to me. Regardless of what method you use to play all of them, they can be very easily emulated these days. An RG Nano can handle GB emulation and earlier no problem, and it's the size of a wristwatch. So pretty much anything can emulate GWG 1 or GWG 4. Getting an original isn't too bad. Many of the widescreen era models are still available for around $70 to $80, which is expensive, but reasonably so. These came out at around $53 in now money. I think this one is definitely worth playing, especially if you get it in one of the Game & Watch Gallery games, but I don't think you should buy an original unless you want it for display value. Not many of these games are worth buying an original for, since the Gallery games did such a good job preserving them, and in some cases, making them even better. I'd shoot for GWG 4 if the graphics don't bother you, as you're getting a lot of good GW games in one, like Donkey Kong, Fire, Mario Bros, Chef, Octopus, Rain Shower. GWG 1 only has Fire, Manhole, Octopus, and Oil Panic, which are all still good, but it's less. GWG 4 has much more, and if you want it physical, it's probably easier to find a copy of GWG 4 than GWG 1. Thanks for watching. Just so you know, you don't have to jump out of a burning building just to find more Game & Watch videos. You can sub and check out all the ones that I have coming out and have released already. I'll soon be done with the Silver series, which means I'll be moving on to the Gold, and we'll be that much closer to the DS inspiration, the multi-screen games. Once the Silver series is done, I'll post a video with all of them edited together into one video. That one should be about an hour long if you're looking for something a little longer to watch. Thanks again, and bye. Bye 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 bye.